History 425, week 10, we're on slide 9. So, I liked this picture so much that I made it my screensaver on my phone, partly to teach myself some of the characters. But I took this picture at a police station, and I was told at the time that this was just posted in all the police stations in China. So there you go. All these things that one should do versus things that one should not do. There's disagreement in the China studies community about what it means exactly when propaganda identifies good and bad behavior. I'm a little bit cynical, I have to say, about these things. When I see something like this, it says to me that everything in the right column there, all of the churs, you remember Bainian Guo Chur, the century of humiliation. Bainian Guo Chur, let's see, Bainian Guo Chur, that's what it is. That chur character, the last one, which means humiliation, is the same one that is the last character in all of these bad things in the right-hand column. And I'm tempted to think whenever I see a list like this that it reveals something about what the problems are, that staying separate from the people is a problem amongst officials in the party, that doing things ultimately that harm the motherland is a problem, to be ignorant, to be unscientific, to not value labor, to be lazy, to be selfish, to be unscrupulous. After all, there is this corruption problem. To be lawless, to wallow, I like this one, to wallow in luxury and pleasure. That's a really great one. So I often suspect that this is an indication. When people make lists, it always reveals something, and I often suspect that that's the problem here. Going on to slide 10. Just another little break for you. Again, the problem of history, the problem of corruption. If this cartoon were shown to a group of 10 Chinese people, I guarantee you a number of them would laugh, a number of them would be absolutely pissed off about foreigners and their views about China. Some would even say that this cartoon is interference in China's internal affairs. That's and I'm not kidding. This is the way a lot of people characterize foreign criticism of things going on in China as some sort of interference. Even though people in the West, if someone were to criticize something that goes on, they would either ignore it, or that is an outsider, they would either ignore it or laugh it off, or maybe be a little bit irritated, but they wouldn't stand up and shout that you're interfering with our internal affairs, which indicates, I think, not only sensibilities that are very touchy, but also a lack of self-confidence. So I'm probably going to get myself in trouble if I keep going. Going on to slide 11. If you ever get a chance to go to Macau, it's a really cool place. Cheap Portuguese wine, great Portuguese food, and interesting architecture. And if you like to gamble, you can do that. But you can have a very good time in Macau and never walk into a casino. There's an awful lot to see there, and it's a very interesting place. However, most Chinese from the mainland who go there, and many, many of them do, don't go there to see the sights or eat the food. They go there to gamble. And the interesting thing about this, now I can talk about this all day long, because I once interviewed for a job to be a security manager at a big casino. and I ended up being the #2 candidate, and they chose #1. But I went through a whole series of interviews, and I learned an awful lot about the gaming industry, as they call it. And one of the things I learned was that there are these VIP rooms. And the VIP rooms, the people who go to those VIP rooms in Macau are people from the mainland with a lot of money. But who are these people from the mainland with a lot of money? They make up several different groups. There are industrialists who have good salaries. They're them, okay? There are government officials who don't have good salaries, but they come to Macau on special VIP flights that are arranged by the casinos on private jets. They land at Macau airport. They get VIP treatment through customs because there's still Macau and Hong Kong are both separate customs territories still, even though they're now part of China, having been returned by the former colonial powers. And they are brought in limousines to these places, and they do all this high roller stuff. Now, some of them are gambling addicts, but others are there for other reasons. They are there to launder money. The easiest and fastest way to launder money in China is to go to Macau with a suitcase full of cash, go to usually it's HSBC, which has been made famous by the nasty things they were doing all over the world. Lately, all you have to do is web search Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, that's HSBC. Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. It's a British institution, actually, in spite of the name. And you'll learn all sorts of things that they've been doing lately to launder money for terrorists and so on. And another of their specialties is to launder money in Macau for Chinese officials, because at each one of these big casinos, there's an HSBC branch. And so if you go to any one of these casinos, I recommend especially the Hotel Lisboa, the Hotel Lisbon, go there and go to the HSBC branch in the basement and watch people walk up with huge amounts of cash. They turn over the cash. HSBC hands out the chips there at the window, and then they go in and they gamble for a while. Then they come back and they cash in all their chips, and they get new money. It's really something. So anyway, there we are. What does all this mean? Not only this, but the fact that a lot of officials are educating their children overseas. They're getting, they're building up preparation to get foreign residency in whatever countries their children study in. In Australia, they're attracting capital by allowing anybody who has a certain amount of money, I think it's 1.5 million Australian dollars, to anybody who can invest $1.5 million in Australia can get instant residency. So what's happening here is that officials are raking in all this money from their corrupt enterprises. They're laundering it. They're investing it overseas, educating their children, getting ready to move, and they're getting ready to move overseas. In other words, they're preparing their escapes. It's difficult to deny. People don't like to talk about it, particularly American business people, particularly American diplomats, but this is what's happening. Going on to slide 12. The economy previously, it's now in transition. This year, you're watching a very interesting year or two where the PRC economy is changing from being an export-oriented economy, that is, an economy that's making its money on exports, to something different, because the demand for goods made in China has dropped due to the global recession. there were already plans afoot in the party and the government to readjust the economy to make it more stable by stimulating domestic demand for goods and services made in China, so that these goods and services made in China would not rely so heavily on foreign markets, because if you are relying on foreign markets to keep your economy going, then that's very undependable for obvious reasons. So the government has been trying to generate new employment that is not derived from foreign direct investment. That's what FDI is, foreign direct investment. They've invested a lot of money in transport infrastructure and in real estate, partly in order to take property off the market so it's not so expensive. But they're not doing the sorts of things which I can't pretend to entirely understand because I'm not an economist, but I do know that there's an awful lot of analysis being written that says that they're not doing the sorts of things to really boost domestic manufacturing consumption as much as they could. And these would include putting a stop to the activity I just described, which is forcing bank loans for favored projects from local Chinese bank branches to businesses that are owned by local CCP committees, because the CCP committee is the one who approves the people on the local boards of the China Industrial Bank and the People's Bank of China and so forth. There's a lot about this in the McGregor book. And the only way that these imbalances that cause too much investment to go into things that local, I'll just say it, local yokels think would be a great idea, at least in the short term, to invest in. Right now, there's all this money going into all these things, like building office space, building apartments, and some of them are going to work out. In Dalian, for example, the place I lived until 2 years ago, there was a great deal of investment going on between 2009 and 2011 in luxury apartments near the ocean. And it's probably a good idea because more and more people are moving there, because there's more and more manufacturing activity there, which requires people who are educated. A lot of it is high technology manufacturing. So those investments might work out. On the other hand, if there are even 20 or 30% too many luxury apartments near the ocean compared to the demand, then that's going to lead to real problems. It'll lead to people who pay an awful lot of money for their apartment and then they find themselves underwater, sort of like what's happening in this country. And the difference is that in this country, these problems occurred according to an economic cycle, and they're being balanced by the marketplace itself. Although there's some debate about that. But in China, the degree of imbalance created in the economy is greater because there's so much state and party intervention in these basic economic decisions, where banks are not making decisions to loan money based on the perceived future success of a project. They're making they're loaning money based on orders from the people who want the money on the local CCP committee. So you can see that this creates a situation where there is distortion in economic activity for the benefit of a few. That happens in the West too, but I don't think it happens to the same degree. So there's my attempt to explain economics. I'm not an economist. Did my best. Going on to slide 13. So we've talked already about the special economic zones, speaking of an unbalanced economy and the difficulties of the current situation. The special economic zones worked out very well for the first couple of decades. However, lately, in the past 10 years, there have been more and more problems. These problems have to do with increasing exploitation of workers as more and more South Korean and Taiwan companies come in. It's very common knowledge among Chinese people that if you work for a Western company, then you're going to be treated better than if you work for a Taiwan-owned company, or God forbid you work for a Korean or a Japanese company, they're going to treat you like shit. Unfortunately, this is what it is. Now, every big city, in essence, nowadays, is a special economic zone, but without all the barbed wire and the checkpoints that one must go through to get into a special economic zone. Huge numbers of people migrate from country to city every year to take up jobs in the new enterprises that are springing up in these cities. The difference, as I think I pointed out last week, is that in the special economic zones there's more experience in dealing with business, and there's more infrastructure. There's water, there's sewage, and so on. There's electricity that's all reliable compared to cities that are not specifically identified as SEZs. So as the number of these enterprises has grown, as the number of Chinese workers has remained relatively stagnant, this has meant in the last 3 years that the wages have been going up at these places, and this in turn has meant that a lot of foreign enterprises are looking now to move elsewhere. This is just beginning to happen. This is a development that may or may not continue to go in that direction, where because prices of labor have gone up, and the level of dissatisfaction with conditions amongst the laborers has gone up, therefore it becomes less and less productive. There's less and less return on investment. Very key phrase in business, ROI, return on investment. There's less and less ROI in manufacturing in China. And we want one thing to watch, a trend to watch over the next 5 years, is whether or not more foreign businesses move out. Going on to slide 14. So, unfortunately, the job market for educated youth is not expanding. More and more people are going to college. It's very interesting. You can find these night schools that spring up around colleges, and as funding to state-owned universities, Beijing University or Liaoning University, as it has been cut back, they've found ways to make money. One of those ways to make money is to sanction the degrees that are awarded by night schools that are nearby the campus, which may or may not provide as good an education as the actual mother campus itself. And so by sanctioning the degrees that are awarded, these schools get money from the students who go there. The faculty quite often are actual faculty from the mother college who are teaching at night to earn money because their salaries are horrid. And so there are more and more university graduates on the market, but the number of jobs is not keeping up. So that means that you end up with these very strange situations of college graduates trying to get jobs as nannies. As we see here in this photograph and the story that came along with it came from China Daily, which is the English language version of the People's Daily. It's run by the Communist Party. In the meantime, there's more and more expression online. You can read a lot about that in McGregor. And the key thing to keep in mind about this is that it's not as controlled as the party would like it to be. Therefore, the party keeps an eye on it. They not only want to try to suppress online expression when it becomes inconvenient, they also use it as a social barometer of sorts to determine what people are upset about lately. And a lot of attention is paid for that reason. Going on to slide 15. You've seen this slide before. These references to core interests of China, the 核心利益, 中国的核心利益. So these are, in general, things having to do with the PRC's control of events on China's periphery. Tibet, Taiwan, uncertain border areas such as with India, the South China Sea, now the Senkaku or Diaoyu Islands. We'll take a look at those problems. Going on to slide 16. A root, before we get into that though, a root of the sensitivity about the periphery of China and so-called core interests that it has. The root of this lies in the ancient problem of regionalism. Without belaboring the topic, this is pretty self-explanatory. You can see that China has been divided over the course of its history at various times. The whole thing about the curse of living in interesting times, you may have heard of, may you live in interesting times, you jerk, is tied to this idea of instability. May you live in unstable times. Times that produce interesting histories, times that produce interesting literature about how Chinese people fared during these periods of disunity and instability. This was also, of course, Chiang Kai-shek's dilemma. It was Mao's dilemma during the Cultural Revolution, where when he spent at the beginning of the Cultural Revolution a lot of time going around China, basically stroking local military leaders to make sure they would do what he wanted when he said so. And it's a problem today that Beijing sees. The nightmare that is lived and relived in Chinese language media, not so much English language Chinese media, is what could happen to China if it ended up splitting up. And indeed, even these ancient divisions from the time before and just after the life of Christ, these ancient geographic divisions have economic, social, and linguistic, especially linguistic, relevance today. That's one reason why the party is so concerned. We'll continue talking about these core interests in slide 17 in audio 3.